Welcome everybody to another edition of WhyHunger Wednesday Wisdom. Happy New Year, happy new decade. And I'm here as your host again, Colin. Be talking to the thought leaders, the movers and shakers within social movements across the globe, talking about food justice, social justice, and so much more. I'm really excited to have today's guest, who is not only a WhyHunger board member, but also co-founder of Rising Root Farm, Black Urban Growers of Bugs. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Karen Washington, the legendary one. How are you doing, Karen?
What's up, everybody? Colin, I'm fine. How about you?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent. It's dealing with the cold, the cold weather, but we're doing good going into this new year. So I want to get things started. Really, just let people know a little bit about your journey into like the urban farming and how did you get started? What was the start of your journey into this work?
It seems like I've told this story so many times because, at 65, being a farmer, it's like, how did you get started? Because, I tell people again, I didn't come from a family of farmers. My parents grew up in New York City. My grandparents grew up in New York City, even though they had ties to the South. They were born in the South. But in terms of farming, none whatsoever. The fact that my mom was a good cook, though, that was my introduction to food, to good food. We ate 3 meals a day. My father, as a matter of fact, in retrospect, was he worked in a grocery store and he was a produce manager. And so we always had fresh fruits and vegetables at our table. But it wasn't until I moved to the Bronx and I had a backyard and I decided for the first time I was going to try to grow some food. Now, I had no idea about growing food, so I relied basically on books from the library, talking to people, and just buying books in the library and talking to people. And there was 4 things that I wanted to grow. Collard greens, had to grow collards, collards. I had to grow collards, peppers, eggplant, and tomatoes. And it was the tomato that changed my world. And so by putting a seed in the ground and for the first time understanding that a tomato and all these vegetables that I've been eating were not grown in a supermarket, but actually grown on land and soil. And the taste, that tomato, that first bite into that tomato just changed my world. I never tasted anything like it. Prior to that, tomatoes taste like cardboard. It had no taste. So that was my introduction to growing food. But then my activism really started when across the street there was an empty lot. And at one time, New York City had over 15,000 vacant lots, mostly in low-income neighborhoods and neighborhoods of color.
Right.
And many of us that could not move got together to turn these empty lots into community gardens. And right now we have over 400 community gardens in New York City alone. And so that's where I got my start in terms of growing food. And my activism came out of the fact that I live in a low-income neighborhood with limited resources, with limited access to good, healthy food. And while I was in that garden, I really not only concentrated on the food, but heard some of the social issues that were surrounding our community. So for me, it wasn't just concentrating on food alone, but that how food intersect so many social issues that were happening. No heated hot water, high rents, overcrowded schools, police brutality, drugs, all these sort of social issues that were happening at the same time. And really got involved in the food movement, but also the social movements that were happening as well.
I see, definitely. And now, we've spoken in the past, but I know you've mentioned not only just looking at ownership, but stewardship of the land. Am I correct? Like stewarding the land and like also the impact of having youth be the future of farming. Could you expound a bit on that? Like how having the youth involved in the land and helping to grow is changing the face of farming, or how it impacts them as well.
Yeah, and I think it's more a food justice and social issue, how we look at land, how we look at the way we grow our food. And for so long, growing up, if you mentioned the word farming within the Black community, it was parallel to slavery. I mean, you say you want to be a farmer, people would joke and say, that's slave mentality. And what had happened is that we were, I would say, whitewashed. um, in that thinking, because at the end of the day, this country was built on the backs of enslaved labor.
Right.
And the fact that this country was built on the fact that enslaved Africans came here with the ability of agriculture, seeds in their hair, the ability to grow food, the mechanisms, the tools, all behind that is what's made this country great. And yet, fast forward, we're now the victims of a food system that has us with diet related diseases, has us moving away from the land, losing contact with the land. And so for me, I'm starting to really see a reversal of this narrative, and people now understanding, especially young people, the true history and how powerful that history is. When you think about us as African Americans being agrarian people and having the knowledge of agriculture, and the fact that we've been fighting for so long for land, and how land has been taken away from us, that now
Mm.
people understand the power of land ownership. Now, I got to be very careful how when I say the power of land ownership, because
Right.
again, that's a capitalistic dialogue that we use when we say about owning stuff. Because
Right.
if we look at our indigenous ancestors, and you look at how we were brought up, our ancestors were brought up, we never thought about owning anything. So it's not about owning, it's about being stewardship. We had a relationship to the land, we had a relationship to animals, to nature, to the environment, that as capitalism came to the forefront and we started commodifying food, commodifying land, and putting monetary value, we sort of lost that. We sort of lost that spirit of being one with the environment. And so now what you're starting to understand is that if you look at who we are in terms of the human race, we should never think about owning anything,
Mm.
because the land, the animals, the seeds, the environment is part of who we are, it's part of nature. And so
Right.
now you're starting to look at the indigenous qualities and properties that for so long have been a survival mechanism, from our ancestors, on how we should live our life and get away from the capitalistic mentality of ownership. So when I say
Mm.
stewards of the land, we need to think about us being stewards of the land. First of all, making us very much aware of the fact that there are a lot of people here in America and that are on stolen land. That's for one thing.
Mm.
And so we got to be very careful how we talk about land ownership, because a lot of the land that supposedly we own has been stolen from
Right.
indigenous people and who have been displaced. And so when we talk about ownership, we have to look at the fact that for so long we've been owning land, we've been owning animals, we've been owning seeds, we've been owning people, and we need to get away from that mentality and look at the word stewardship in terms of being one with nature, and being as human beings, being safeguards, being able to be one with nature, and nourish the land and nourish the plants and nourish the animals, and so that
Protected.
in essence we're in harmony. And so this is information that we're passing on to young people, and they're starting to understand that and getting away from the negative and abusive language and oppressive language that has been given to us for so many years when it comes to agriculture and ownership of land.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. And from there they get to carry on the legacy of how that land gets to be, um, how people get to be empowered through, working with the land and being one with the land, and protecting the land as well. They get to push it on the generations and generations. So I definitely get that. What's something that you feel the youth get to understand? What's some actions or some action steps or some things that you want the youth, or other farmers to understand going forward?
Well, I'm going to sort of step back, because I think there's two messages that I want to convey. First, to the
Sure.
elders, because I'm an elder,
Yes. Yes.
and so
Yes.
the message that I want to get to convey to elders is that we have a budding youth,
Mm.
that population that want to go out. They're proactive. They want to learn. They may learn things differently now because of technology, but
Mm.
as elders, we need to embrace that. We need to
Right.
embrace that and find a way that we can communicate better and take the youth underneath our wings and to
Yeah.
show them in terms of history, really talk about history, but also guide them in a way
Yes.
that the failures and successes that we've learned, we can pass on to them. So in terms of mentorship, with the youth, have some patience. Have a little patience with a lot of our elders, because for so long we've been holding down the fort, and so it's hard to let go of that grasp. But
Yeah.
with a little understanding and patience, I think I want to see how both the elders and the youth can merge and be together in this movement, especially black and brown
Mm.
young men and women who now understand the power. We fought for so long, the elders have fought for so long for social justice, for civil rights. And we want to make sure that our young people understand the history of the struggle. Because in order for us to move forward, in order for us to be strong, we have to make sure that our youth understand the struggle on how we got here. And what happens
Yes.
time and time again is when you don't know your history and it's forgotten, then you think upon yourself that you're doing something new and innovative, and you're not
Right.
paying homage to those that have sacrificed for so long for you to be in the position that you are in now. And so I tell my youth time and time again, if you're lucky to have grandparents and great grandparents who are farmers, take out those iPhones, Samsung Galaxy, and record their history. Record their history.
Mm.
Talk to grandma, grandpa, abuelo, abuelo. Get that information so that you have, and it can be passed down from generation to generation. Because what I'm so fearful of is by 2030, 2050, when the economy is going to change, the country is going to be more colorful in terms of the amount of black and brown people. And I don't want people to say that your parents never farmed, they never had any a part in agriculture. And so there needs to be a legacy that's left behind so that we're never forgotten of the struggle
Right.
that so many of our ancestors in our past have made so that we can do the work that we're doing today.
Absolutely. It's a legacy work. Absolutely. I agree with that.
Legacy
Definitely.
work.
Do you have any last words that you'd like to just share, Karen, for the community?
Yeah, I just want our people to understand that we stand on the shoulders of greatness, and that our power comes from our humility and our community. And as long as we stay together, as long as whatever we do, we come from a place of love, but of
Mm.
community, we can move mountains. We can
Mm.
move mountains. And so, for me, as we go into this next new decade, the
Yes.
20s, things are going to change, but at the end of the day, what makes us strong is family and community. And so when others are falling down, we must be there to lift them up, hold them and lift them up. And that's the message I want people to always remember, the importance of family and community. When we fall, we are there to lift up those that have fallen on hard times.
Absolutely. That is key. Well, thank you so much, Karen. It was a pleasure having you and for you sharing such a wealth of knowledge and history today. So I would thank you so much for joining us for this episode of WhyHunger Wednesday Wisdom. And for everyone out there, thank you for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on all social media at WhyHunger Fans on Facebook, WhyHunger Pix on PIX on Instagram, WhyHunger on Twitter, and also you can subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/WhyHunger. So thank you for joining us for another episode of WhyHunger Wednesday Wisdom. I'll talk to you soon.